for me also the main thing that was missing from the Abrahamic religions, that you don't really have a concept of who God actually is and
You
his
don't. You
activities.
really
Yeah,
don't. It's not something they like to talk about.
yeah,
Just the
it's
other day,
forbidden.
just the
Yeah.
other day, in a major Brazilian newspaper, there was a thing, they were sharing a little artifact. I don't know, you might have seen it. Maybe it was in your country. You might have seen the news. They found this ancient, they were sharing this ancient manuscript, like the oldest thing. There's something they found, mentioned Eve. I don't know. Anyway, it was some ancient. So they were just talking about it. So it was an article talking. So the article was like, oh, 5 things about the Bible, you don't know. And like this is a Brazilian newspaper, it was saying. And the first item on the list was, mentioning this Bible study person, is this famous, you know, translator or academic of the Bible who's working for the Bible Society, like a serious Bible person. And he said, people don't know this, but that Bible doesn't talk about God. It talks about other things, but it doesn't talk about God. And so they didn't like that. It was like a very dramatic statement he made. So he was kind of like pushed aside a bit. This is like decades ago. But this is the guy's statement. The Bible doesn't talk about God. And it doesn't. So actually, the Bible really has no information on God. The Old Testament, I mean, there's practically zero information on God. Practically zero. And of course, and then the New Testament, what they did is, since they didn't have any information on God before, when they created Christianity, they were like, well, we know about Jesus, so let's go with that. So then, Jesus becomes God. But again, in the second, the New Testament, there's also no, of course they'll say no, but just Jesus and Jesus is God. Yeah, there's information about Jesus, but there's actually no information about God still. And then when the Muslims came, and then they just started with, no, look, you can't even talk about God. So they even started like, just forget about it. Just the whole thing is just God, forget it. Can't talk about it, can't understand it, can't draw him, right? It's completely offensive to make any sort of art depicting God and even the prophet. So look, just forget about it. You can't talk about it, can't draw it, can't just, inconceivable. Great, all is great, but it's inconceivable. You can't understand it. So they just gave, like, officially gave up on talking about God as a theological principle. And you just can't talk about it. You just can't go there. So really, which is a point I keep bringing up, and it's not just to be mean or because I'm being sectarian, but really, this is it. I mean, if you want to know about God, you have no other place to go to except the Vedas, and it's specifically within the Vedas, the Puranas, and specifically within the Puranas, the Bhagavad Purana. So, I mean, this is it. The Srimad Bhagavatam is where you can come hear about God. And Bhagavad Gita, if you understand what God has to teach. This is really it. Objectively speaking, if you lay out all the world's traditions, on a table, and you're completely open, you're an alien, you're coming down, you have no prejudice or preconceived ideas. You just want to, like, okay, what does planet Earth have to say about God? And you just put it on the table. This is it. It's going to be like, you know, the whole, and then everybody else has basically nothing.
Mhm.
It's the truth, which is
Yeah.
which is fascinating. And at the
Yeah.
same time, this is like the oldest tradition. So it's like, I think it's super cool that here we have like vast amounts of details of information, and it's the oldest one. Because of course, if this was like something somebody created last week, it'd be like, yeah, whatever. But the fact that this is so ancient, you know, this is like, it obviously predates Christianity. So it's like, so I mean, it's like no discussion. Of course, we think it's way older, like 5,000 years ago. But even just like the worst, like just the most basic archaeological evidence will predate, of course, Christianity, what to speak of Islam. So at the very least, you're like, contemporary to Judaism, the very least. But of course, we know it's older. And so then you have this most ancient tradition with the most information. I mean, I think for me, that's just like a no-brainer. It's like, hello. It's like, I think for me, it's so like, yeah. And and then the cherry on the cake is that when you look at it, when you examine the tradition, what do you get? You get something wonderful that makes sense, that satisfies the intellect, satisfies the heart. So you read about it, you go, yes. And then the more you get into it, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. And I ask myself openly, okay, let's just pretend this is all just made up stuff. You know, I'm willing to accept this is all wrong. This is all made up. How would I invent? How would I, if I had to like invent, okay, invent a version of God, make it better than this, like invent a better version of God than Krishna? I can't come up with anything. You know, that's a great exercise. You can try that. Like if you had to come up with something, like you're just making it up, you're pretending this is all just made up stuff. Somebody just sat down, a group of people, whatever. They made this all up. It's all BS. No, not BS, but anyway, it's made up. Now you go ahead and you make something up more, just better, just like a better version of God than this. I can't. I mean, I think this is it. I mean, this thing, you know, it's like it, you nailed it. It's like, I can't think of anything better than Krishna, you know? I can't think of anything better. Vrindavan and Krishna. I mean, it's just genius, you know. If somebody made it up, it's just such genius. It's so perfect, you know, like, yes, of course, God wouldn't be sitting on a powerful throne with like lights coming out, you know, like what? No, of course he'd be in like a bucolic, natural, super low key. Yeah, of course he'd do that. I mean, you know, that makes much more sense. Everything. And of course he wouldn't be old, he'd be young and he'd be having fun. He wouldn't be like, oh yes, I'm the Lord, you know, and stuff. You know, you can't make anything up better than this. You can't. So yeah.